Welcome back to Broadcasting Seeds, the podcast where we dive deep into the strange, the unexplained, and sometimes the downright terrifying. I'm your host, Bennett Tanton, and today, well, let's just say you may want to check your surroundings before we get into this one, because we're talking cursed objects, relics you should never, ever touch. You know, the kinds of things that give you that little voice inside that says, hey, maybe don't pick that up. Maybe leave it exactly where it is. And for good reason. Now, I know what you're thinking. What's the big deal with a couple of dusty antiques, right? A fancy diamond here, a mysterious box there. How much trouble can an object cause? Well, history says a lot, actually. So much, in fact, that entire legends have grown around certain objects because of the wreckage they've supposedly left in their wake. From mysterious deaths and sudden misfortunes to hauntings that just don't quit, cursed objects have a bad habit of leaving destruction wherever they go. But, hey, the past is the past, right? Surely we've moved on from such superstitions in the age of smartphones and space tourism, right? Not quite, because modern cursed objects are on the rise, and they're not just lurking in musty museums or ancient temples. They're showing up in pawn shops, estate sales, and yes, even on the internet, ready to haunt the next unsuspecting buyer who clicks add to cart. In today's episode, we're going to cover 5 topics about cursed objects that might just change the way you look at those quaint little antiques gathering dust on the shelf. We'll cover the origins and histories of the big-name cursed objects like the infamous Hope Diamond and the notorious Dybbuk box. Then we'll dive into some modern examples and explore the psychology of how belief, or even just suggestion, can make these curses feel very real. But that's not all. As always, we'll peel back the layers and ask a few uncomfortable questions. Like, who's collecting these cursed things and why? Are they just relics of superstition, or could there be a darker market out there? And yeah, buckle up for this one. Is it possible that some of these cursed objects have attracted the attention of the military? Think about it. Weaponized relics, an idea straight out of science fiction, or maybe not. So, sit tight. Keep your hands and feet inside the ride and make sure you don't touch anything that looks even remotely questionable. Because once we dig into these stories, you might just find yourself second-guessing the very objects in your home. Stay tuned. All right, let's start at the beginning, where curses first made their mark on history. And trust me, some of these stories go way, way back, and they all start with the same warning. Don't mess with what you don't understand. Yet, as we know, people rarely listen. Whether it's out of curiosity, greed, or just plain arrogance, someone always seems to think they can handle the so-called cursed object. Now, let's kick things off with a little sparkle. The Hope Diamond, one of the world's most infamous gemstones, is a rock with a seriously dark resume. It's said to have originated in India, where it was possibly stolen from a statue of a Hindu goddess, a major no-no if you believe in karma. Once in the hands of European aristocrats, things got dicey fast. A string of owners met untimely and often gruesome deaths. They were decapitated, impoverished, betrayed, or just plain unlucky. Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI both owned the stone before, well, we know how that turned out. And later, even some of its handlers and curators met freak accidents or deaths after handling it. But it's not just the Hope Diamond. There's another tale that could chill you to the bone, the Dybbuk box. This isn't just an antique wine cabinet, it's a Jewish relic that allegedly holds a restless spirit, a Dybbuk. According to folklore, a Dybbuk is a malicious entity that clings to a person and brings misfortune or even possession. This box surfaced in modern times at an estate sale, and it supposedly brought its buyer a series of disturbing nightmares, health issues, and paranormal phenomena. The Dybbuk box became so notorious it inspired a movie, and people even say strange things happen to those who look at it for too long online. Think about that next time you go deep diving into the creepier parts of eBay. Now, these stories aren't just urban legends or fairy tales, they're woven into folklore. Across cultures, there's this underlying warning. Some objects carry more than just their physical history. They carry energy. In Egypt, for instance, the ancient pharaohs believed so much in protecting their afterlives that they placed curses over their tombs, daring anyone to disturb their peace. The discovery of King Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922 supposedly unleashed one of these curses. Soon after, people associated with the tomb started falling ill, dying mysteriously, or experiencing uncanny misfortunes. Whether it was coincidence, disease, or something more supernatural, we may never know. But think about it. How often in history have objects become the centerpieces of horror stories? Not because of their value, but because of the tragedies attached to them. What is it about these relics that makes us shiver just thinking about them? And why do they seem to follow certain patterns like death and disaster? The thing is, these ancient objects are seen as bearers of memory. Maybe, just maybe, they carry imprints of past trauma, or they absorb energies of the people who once owned them, and as these stories have been passed down, they've gained a kind of lore. When you have centuries of people believing something is cursed, that fear starts to get a life of its own. And honestly, folks, history has a funny way of remembering only the juicy parts. So, next time you see that little figurine at a garage sale that gives you the creeps, maybe walk away. It could be that what's attached to it is a lot heavier than the object itself. So, you'd think that with all our technological advances, cursed objects would be a relic of the past, right? After all, we're a society that believes in facts, science, and logic. And yet, the stories of cursed objects are more alive today than ever. In fact, they're just a click away. Thanks to the internet, haunted and cursed items can now be bought and sold online as casually as you'd buy a pair of sneakers. Imagine that. Let's talk about a modern phenomenon that has people on edge: haunted dolls. The most famous is Annabelle, the subject of several horror movies, but she's just the tip of the iceberg. Go to any online marketplace, seriously try it, and you'll find sellers hawking dolls they claim are cursed, haunted, or possessed. The descriptions read like a paranormal dating profile. Meet Sarah, 1920s porcelain doll. Warning, may cause night terrors and strange shadows. And here's the kicker. People are buying them. Some as a thrill, sure, but others are convinced these dolls really hold a sinister power. But it's not just dolls. There's the cursed painting phenomenon, which gained traction with a particular piece known as The Hands Resist Him, painted by Bill Stoneham in 1972. It shows a boy standing next to a doll-like girl in front of a glass door, with ghostly hands pressing against the glass. Legend has it that owners of the painting experience disturbing dreams, unexplained shadows, and that the figures in the painting move or even exit the frame at night. It became a sensation when it was auctioned online, with people claiming its eerie influence affected their lives in weird, unsettling ways. Stoneham himself shrugged it off, saying it was inspired by a childhood photo, but the folks who bought and resold it swear it carries something more. Modern cursed objects aren't always as elaborate as ancient gems or pharaohs' tombs, either. Some of them are as mundane as a ring, a mirror, or even an old chair. Take the case of the Chair of Death in the UK. In 1702, a convicted murderer, Thomas Busby, supposedly cursed his chair before his execution, vowing that anyone who sat in it would die. And for hundreds of years, people who dared to sit in that chair reportedly met mysterious ends. Today, it's hanging in a museum, literally suspended in the air, so no one can sit in it by accident. And here's where things get interesting. In today's world, some of these haunted items are treated as more than just oddities. They become pop culture sensations and even objects of obsession. Shows like Ghost Adventures feature cursed artifacts, and they're often displayed in horror-themed museums for thrill seekers to gawk at. Haunted houses, paranormal enthusiasts, collectors, everyone seems to want a piece of the action. But let's be real. How many of these curses are genuine, and how much is driven by suggestion or, frankly, a good old-fashioned scare? It's worth asking if these modern cursed objects are really haunted, or if they're just capitalizing on our fascination with the unknown. The human mind has a way of filling in the blanks, especially when fear or superstition is involved. Just knowing a story about a curse can make someone anxious enough to believe that a normal, explainable event, like a flickering light, is something otherworldly. And once you buy into that belief, it's like opening Pandora's box. So, we've covered the history and even some modern cursed objects, but let's dig into what actually makes these things feel cursed. Is it possible that the real power of a cursed object doesn't lie within the object itself, but rather in our own minds? The power of suggestion is a wild thing, and if you've ever spent a night at a haunted house or seen a horror movie, you probably know just what I'm talking about. Let's take a look at how our minds can turn an ordinary, everyday object into a symbol of dread. The moment someone tells you something is cursed, it's like your brain goes into hyperdrive. Suddenly, every flickering light or creak in the floorboards becomes proof that something sinister is afoot. Psychologists call this confirmation bias. It's when we look for evidence that supports what we already believe. If you're convinced that the dusty old mirror you picked up at an antique shop is haunted, you're going to interpret every speck of dust and weird reflection as part of that haunting. And it doesn't stop there. There's also something called nocebo effect, which is like the dark twin of the placebo effect. With the placebo effect, you take a sugar pill thinking it's medicine, and sometimes you actually feel better because your brain tricks you into it. The nocebo effect works the same way, but in reverse. If you believe an object will bring you bad luck or physical harm, your mind can actually make you feel sick, anxious, or even physically hurt. That cursed mirror? Just thinking about it might be enough to give you a headache or a sleepless night. This isn't just theory. It's been studied and documented. People have reported everything from headaches and dizziness to actual physical ailments after encountering objects they believe are cursed or haunted. And get this, even though scientists don't necessarily believe in curses, they can't fully explain why our minds seem so susceptible to them. All they know is that belief itself is a powerful tool. It's as if the mere act of believing in a curse sets the wheels in motion for it to start affecting you. And that's where things get really fascinating. Think of the Dybbuk box we talked about earlier. It's just a box, right? But the moment it's labeled as cursed, it becomes something more. And every story, every retelling strengthens that curse, makes it feel more real. People have reportedly experienced everything from health problems to hallucinations after handling that box, or even being in the same room as it. Is it haunted? Or have people just talked themselves into believing it is? The line between reality and belief gets pretty blurry when our minds start to fill in the gaps. It's also worth noting that curses and haunted objects have historically found their roots in belief systems and rituals. Many cultures see objects as holding spiritual or energetic power, and in some cases, people genuinely believe that a curse can be placed on an object and passed down. And once that idea is planted, it's hard to shake. That's why people tend to experience the effects of a cursed object only after learning about its backstory. It's not like people are being terrorized by every antique they pick up. Only the ones they know have a reputation. But this raises a big question. Are we more vulnerable to curses now than we used to be? In the age of the internet, it's easier than ever to read about a cursed object and spiral into that fear. Social media, YouTube, podcasts. You can go from 0 to terrified in 10 minutes with all the stories out there. It's almost as if cursed objects gain more power the more people believe in them. So, what does this mean? Do these objects have actual supernatural power? Or is it all in our heads? And if it's all in our heads, does that make it any less real? That's something we're going to chew on as we move forward. Because whether it's the Hope Diamond or a haunted doll from eBay, the belief in curses is very real. And in many cases, that belief is just as dangerous as the curse itself. Now, in our next section, we're taking a turn into darker territory. What happens when cursed objects become valuable? In this world of collectors and thrill seekers, there's a whole market for haunted artifacts. But it's not just about collecting something creepy for the thrill of it. Some of these cursed objects are finding their way onto the black market. And, as you might imagine, it's not always for innocent reasons. So, let's dive into the underworld of cursed relics and the people who are willing to risk it all to possess them. All right, folks, so we've talked about the legends and the psychology of cursed objects, but what happens when these so-called cursed relics become items of trade? Believe it or not, there's a market for haunted, cursed, and otherwise spooky artifacts. And it's not just collectors looking for a conversation piece to sit on the shelf. There's a real underground trade in cursed objects, with some folks willing to pay big money for a slice of supernatural danger. Let's just say if there's a buck to be made, someone's probably already making it. Now you might think, who in their right mind would want to buy a cursed object? But here's the thing. For some, the appeal lies in the thrill of owning something otherworldly. There are collectors who see cursed artifacts as trophies, evidence that they've acquired something rare, powerful, and even dangerous. It's a way of flirting with the unknown from a safe distance. Or so they hope. Because in the world of cursed artifacts, there's no real safe way to own something that supposedly brings misfortune. Let's take a look at how some of these artifacts get into the black market in the first place. For starters, it's often through estate sales, auctions, or private collectors looking to unload an object that they claim has a dark history. Some of these objects are said to have ties to violent events, tragic deaths, or rituals that were never meant to be disturbed. And while most auction houses shy away from selling haunted items outright, others lean into the folklore, putting these artifacts on display for the brave and curious to bid on. You might have to pay a premium for a so-called cursed item, but hey, what's a little extra cash for something that might make your life a living nightmare? But the black market for cursed objects doesn't just end with estate sales and auctions. There's a darker side where things get really interesting and a little disturbing. For example, there's evidence that some of these cursed objects are finding their way into the hands of individuals who believe they can use them for, shall we say, less than innocent purposes. Some occultists or practitioners of dark magic see cursed objects as tools, vessels that can be used to harm, manipulate, or control others. To them, a cursed object isn't just a creepy antique, it's a source of power. And that's where things get murky, because these people aren't buying the objects just for the thrill. They're trying to tap into whatever energy or curse the object is rumored to carry. And here's a fun fact to keep you up at night. Some of these cursed objects even find their way into private collections of wealthy elites who thrive on the idea of owning something taboo. For them, it's not just about power, it's about exclusivity. They want something nobody else would dare to own. To them, a cursed artifact is like a badge of honor, proof that they're willing to face the dangers most people would run from. It's almost like cursed object collecting is a dark art all its own, a status symbol for those looking to make a statement. But this raises an even bigger question. If people are willing to buy these cursed objects, who's out there selling them? In the black market, cursed relics are sometimes sold by people who claim to be paranormal experts, historians, or even artifact liberators, people who say they're removing cursed items from where they shouldn't be and bringing them to new, worthy owners. Now, whether they're legit or just capitalizing on people's fascination with the macabre is anyone's guess. But for every buyer willing to pay, there's a seller ready to talk up the curse, whisper about its dark past, and leave the new owner to deal with the fallout. And then we have the real risk takers, folks who buy these objects not just as collector's items, but as potential weapons. Yes, you heard that right. Some believe these objects can be weaponized in a way. They want to harness the curse, the dark energy, or whatever residual supernatural power the object supposedly holds. Imagine that. A cursed object, not just as a haunted relic, but as a weapon. If you think that's crazy, just wait till our next section, where we explore the unsettling idea that some of these artifacts may have even caught the eye of military research. Yup, you heard me right. If there's even a hint of power in these cursed relics, you can bet someone, somewhere, is trying to figure out how to harness it. So let's dive into that twisty, speculative terrain and see what the world of military research might want with cursed objects. Stay tuned, because things are about to get even stranger. We're about to go down a rabbit hole that would make even the most hardened conspiracy theorist raise an eyebrow. We've all heard stories of cursed objects, but what if I told you there's speculation, rumors, let's call it, that some branches of military research might be taking an interest in these items? I know, it sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi novel, but hear me out. If there's even a chance that these relics possess any kind of power, wouldn't it make sense that certain groups would be curious to see if that power could be harnessed? Now, let's get this straight. I'm not saying the military has a department of haunted relics or anything, although, let's be honest, it'd make a great movie. But what we do know is that certain branches of military and intelligence have been interested in paranormal research before. During the Cold War, the U.S. government experimented with things like remote viewing, a type of psychic spying where people would attempt to visualize distant locations without being physically present. It sounds far-fetched, but they took it seriously enough to pour millions into programs like Project Stargate. And if they were willing to try out psychic experiments, who's to say they wouldn't also look into cursed objects? Think about it. A cursed object could, in theory, be a tool for psychological warfare. Imagine slipping a cursed relic into an enemy's base or sending it as a gift to a political rival. Even if the curse isn't real, just the belief in it could cause chaos, sleepless nights, and paranoia. If history and the nocebo effect tell us anything, it's that a person who believes they're cursed is likely to act as if they are. Paranoia, fear, irrational decisions, they all become possible weapons, and all without a single bullet being fired. Of course, using cursed objects this way would require more than just belief. It would require a way to measure, control, and weaponize the so-called energy these objects are said to carry. Now that's where things get speculative. Are there really scientists and researchers out there trying to measure the electromagnetic or spiritual frequencies of cursed objects? It sounds wild, but fringe science has explored stranger things. And if there's even a slight chance that these relics hold some unknown form of energy, you can bet that someone, somewhere, is trying to study it. There's also an interesting link between military research and ancient relics. During World War II, for example, the Nazis were notoriously fascinated with collecting artifacts they believed could grant them supernatural power. The Spear of Destiny, the Holy Grail, legendary items they thought might turn the tide of the war. And while we can't say with certainty that cursed objects were on their radar, it's clear they believed in the possibility of tapping into some kind of mystical energy. Maybe today's researchers are more subtle, or maybe they're simply better at keeping things under wraps. Either way, history suggests that there's been a long-standing interest in combining the mystical with the tactical. Let's not forget, too, that with the rise of AI and modern tech, it's not impossible to imagine a scenario where cursed objects are used in combination with advanced surveillance or psychological tactics. Picture this. A soldier or agent receives a cursed item like an ancient ring or medallion that supposedly causes nightmares. Combine that with targeted sound frequencies or subtle environmental manipulation, and suddenly you're engineering a situation where the person feels haunted. It's like psychological warfare in hyperdrive. Technology amplifying superstition, turning a simple object into a tool of psychological destabilization. Am I saying that any military or intelligence agency has succeeded in weaponizing a cursed relic? No. But I am saying it's not completely off the table, especially when you consider the lengths that governments have gone to explore the unknown. If there's even a whisper of untapped power in these objects, someone will be willing to take the risk to study it, maybe even try to weaponize it. So, where does that leave us? With more questions than answers, honestly. Are cursed objects powerful relics, misunderstood historical artifacts, or just figments of our overactive imaginations? In a way, it doesn't even matter, because as long as we believe they're powerful, they become powerful. Belief is a potent thing. It can start wars, drive movements, and even, just maybe, turn an ordinary object into something with the power to change lives. And when belief mixes with power, money, and the possibility of control, that's where the real story begins. All right, folks. We've covered some seriously strange ground today, but don't go anywhere. We've got a little wrap-up coming that will tie all of this together and ask the big question: should we be messing with these things at all? Well, folks, we've gone from ancient legends to military conspiracies, and I think it's safe to say that cursed objects are no joke, whether they're actually cursed or not. If there's one thing we can take away from today, it's that belief is powerful. Whether that belief is in the form of ancient superstition, psychological influence, or even speculative science, it has the potential to alter lives, for better or for worse. And if history's any indication, people are drawn to cursed objects, whether out of curiosity, greed, or the thrill of the unknown. But maybe the real question isn't whether curses are real, but rather, do we really want to find out? There's a reason these objects have stuck around in our stories, in our folklore, and now, apparently, in underground markets and black budget labs. It's like we're endlessly fascinated by the idea of danger wrapped in mystery, like moths drawn to a flame. But remember, every moth that flies too close gets burned. So, next time you see that tempting little antique or hear about a haunted item up for sale, ask yourself, do you want to be the next chapter in that object's story? Or maybe, just maybe, is it better to leave some mysteries unsolved? Thank you all for tuning into Broadcasting Seeds. I hope this episode gave you something to think about, maybe even made you look around your room and wonder if there's anything you should have left at the last garage sale. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, share, and review the podcast. It helps spread the word and keeps us going on this journey through the weird, the wild, and the unexplained. Until next time, keep your wits about you, keep an open mind, but maybe not so open that the curses come pouring in. Stay safe, stay curious, and remember, some seeds were never meant to be planted.
I got bad thoughts that make my mind scared, hold me hostage and they don't fight fair. Who gon' pray for me and wipe all my tears? Who gon' save me if you not right here? Move this darkness and make my sight clear. Take me away cause I don't like here. Ghosts of my past, they fill in the night air. Wake me up, I'm trapped in my nightmares. Wake me up, I'm trapped in my nightmares. Drowning, I'm off the deep end. Apparitions of all my demons. All my thoughts are committing treason. All alone, who gon' hear me screaming? Manifestations of my fears. Regrets that stretched out for light years. Can almost touch the light, homie, it's right there. Body free but trapped in my nightmares. Wake me up, don't let me drown. All the lights are fading now. All my life is fading now. All my life is fading now. Wake me up, don't let me drown. All my life is fading now. All my life is fading now. Body free but trapped in my nightmares. Wake me up, I'm trapped in my nightmares. Trapped in my nightmares.